Before I go into the video, I did want to let you know that I did make a new Discord. Consider supporting the channel by joining it. It is free to join. Because it's new, if you want to help create a great community, come by and check it out. Now with that out of the way, let's get into this week's video. What's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on Pub Stomp MTG. Glad to have you here. At first you're probably thinking, hey Pub Stomp, didn't you already make a Mishra claimed by Gix EDH deck tech? And the short answer is yes, I did make a deck tech. If you want to look at it, you could look at the link above right here. So the big reason why I'm getting another stab at this commander is mainly because I didn't utilize the full potential it does have with creatures. With that first deck tech, I actually made a polymorph theme, and I feel like I could go a different route with a higher power gameplay with Mishra. Obviously, by no means this is a CDH deck tech. However, I feel like this could be a very high power commander because it has so many combos to win off the game. And because of the colors of red and black, we have a lot of different utilization for interrupting our opponents by hating on their pieces. Obviously, in this deck, we're not really going to go for the backside. I mean, I did add the Phyrexian Dragon Engine in here mainly because obviously if you get it off, you're going to be winning more. However, this deck really revolves around that front side. Whenever you attack, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of attacking creatures. Obviously, we're not going to read that whole other part where it melds with the Phyrexian Dragon Engine. I know a lot of people are passing this off as just a normal commander, like whatever, it's okay power level, but I feel like this could be a very high power level because of what it does. It kind of reminds me of Sheoldra the Apocalypse a little bit, mainly because people are kind of passing off Mishra as a okay card and an okay commander. However, I do feel like this is going to have the same effect Sheoldra did have, where people think it just had an okay static ability. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life, and whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. Very simple. However, if you're not paying attention to standard, Sheoldra is absolutely killing it in there. It just sits on the board and absolutely destroys games. Obviously, Mishra is not focused on drawing cards, but it is focused on going wide. The more creatures you do have attacking, the more opponents lose life and you gain life, and that could be incredible in this deck. So that's actually what I'm going to first discuss in this deck, is going wide, because I feel like that's probably the best strategy for this deck, because we can get some huge life swings with swinging with all our creatures. So the first cards I did think about were the Pyromancers, the young and seasoned Pyromancer here. Because we are a heavy interaction deck, I feel like young Pyromancer will get us a lot of tokens on the battlefield so that we could get that life gain, also life loss for our opponents as well. Also, I do think Seasoned Pyromancer is fantastic in this deck because it could loot for us, get some cards that we actually do want, and then make some tokens on the way there. And it does have that exile ability of making 2 tokens if we need to add them on the battlefield. Also, because we are going wide, we do have the new Lagomos, Hand of Hatred. At each combat, you're going to be making a 2/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Obviously, it's going to be sacrificed at the beginning of the next end step, but I really like it for that tap ability. Obviously, if 5 or more creatures died this turn, you could search your library by tapping it, which I feel like is actually going to be pretty easy to do. So obviously I feel like this is a great include in this deck as well. For a temporary token maker and also a tutor on a creature is fantastic. Lastly, you're probably going to call me crazy by adding this card in here, but I feel like it's going to be a really great include because it actually could go in an infinite combo if we wanted to add it in there. So the card I'm talking about is Skitterbeam Battalion. So let's be honest, we're not going to be casting it for that 9 mana cost. We're going to be casting it for that 5 mana cost for its prototype cost. So it does have trample and haste, and when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, create 2 tokens that are a copy of it. Later on, I'm going to dive more into this card, but this is a great fit in the deck because we are going wide and we could swing in with Mishra's ability to gain life and make our opponents lose life. So now that we're going wide, let's talk about the benefits of going wide. So an absolute easy include would be Gix Yawgmoth Praetor. A couple weeks ago, I did make a deck tech on him, so if you want to check him out, the link is on here. This is going to give us some excellent card advantage. Obviously, it's going to give your opponent's card advantage, but they are going to be losing life, and little by little with our commander and the mix with Gix, we can slowly drain our opponents for victory. Also, later on in the game, if you don't have really anything to do, obviously that 7 cost ability is absolutely insane right there, but could be possibly very whiffable. Another similar card to Mishra I would want to add into this list is Hellrider, because it does have haste, and whenever a creature you control attacks, Hellrider deals 1 damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacked. So if Mishra is not on the board, this is a great opportunity to ping our opponents even more. However, since a lot of of creatures are going to be entering the battlefield, Perforos God of the Forge is absolutely perfect in this deck. Honestly, it's one of the game winners in this deck. I'm going to mention a little bit later on. But whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Perforos deals 2 damage to each opponent and also has that creature buff ability of a red and a 2 colorless, so that when you're going wide with your tokens, you could actually buff them up to get that extra damage. Obviously, Perforos is a combo engine, so we're going to be showing some combos later on in the video, but let's talk about some punishers of the deck. Because this is a higher power deck, we want to make sure we're stopping our opponents from doing what they need to do in order to win. I know for me, when I'm going to be playing this deck, a lot of my friends usually like to play some high powered stuff, and I found these very effective in Rakdos decks. First one I did want to mention, obviously it's a fantastic card, is Doth the Voidwalker. Just having a Leyline of the Void on a creature is absolutely perfect just for 2 mana, and also when you sacrifice it, you can choose an exiled card from an opponent owns with a Void counter, and you may play it this turn without paying its mana cost. I've seen this card shut down so many games, especially with graveyard decks, so obviously a great punisher right here. Another punisher I do want to mention is Opposition Agent as well, because it does have flash and you control your opponents while they are searching their libraries, and obviously it has that fantastic second ability. While opponents are searching their library, really you are searching the library, but they exile each card they find. You may play those cards as long as they remained exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast them. So obviously this shuts down fetch lands, this shuts down a lot of tutors. In my meta, the games I play with my friends, usually they are pretty greedy when it comes to mana bases and also tutors, so this is a perfect counter to those tutoring effects. Also, if we really want to punish greedy mana bases, we do have Magus of the Moon and Blood Moon. Obviously they have that ability of non-basic lands are mountains, so obviously this hoses a lot of games, but this really won't affect our game plan because it's pretty straightforward. We're going wide with creatures and making people lose life and gaining life ourselves. Again, in a casual game, I probably wouldn't play these, but since we were playing a little more high-powered, I would definitely include these so that people could not fetch for lands because they are basic mountains. Another card I thought I absolutely had to include this list because we want to make sure we're punishing our opponents for playing a lot of spells, so why not punish them further with Painful Quandary? This was a sweet new reprint in the Brothers War, and it absolutely is great in this deck because we're going to be draining our opponents so much, they might not want to lose 5 life, so they have to discard cards whenever they're playing spells. And if they absolutely want to keep their cards in their hand, oh, by all means, lose 5 life and then lose some more life with Mishra. So again, with most of these pieces, we're trying to disrupt our opponents left and right so that we could take away an easy win for them. So how about us? How can we win with this deck? If we want to reliably get our combo pieces, we could easily tutor up some cards. So I'm not going to mention a lot of them because they are pretty familiar to a lot of people that play high power games, but I do have them in the deck list down below if you want to go check it out. But let's play a fun combo that we could use to find our combo pieces. So Peer into the Abyss is an all-star in a lot of CDH games. However, it's a really great card in here because we could find our combo pieces by drawing half our deck. However, we will lose half our life, but that's not a big deal because of Mishra's ability to gain life. So we have a lot of cards in our hand, but how can we get some mana so that we can play our combos? You could easily put some mana rocks on the battlefield that are free, like Chrome Mox, Mana Vault, or Mana Crypt. However, there's a very underutilized spell that I feel like is absolutely fantastic with Peer into the Abyss. I don't see it as much, and with Inner Fire, you could add red mana to your mana pool for each card in your hand. So with this ritual, you could easily gain up to like 40 or so red floating mana. Obviously, it is dependent on your hand size, but you could easily gain so much mana off of Peer into the Abyss with this card. So we have all this mana. What do we want to do with this mana? In this deck, we do have a lot of combos that we could go off. Because we are on a go wide strategy, I feel like going with a lot of tokens, going on the battlefield would be a perfect fit for this deck so that we could swing in, make our opponents lose a lot of life, and then we gain a lot of life with Mishra's ability. So we do have the Zealous Kiki Jiki combo right here. It's pretty simple and pretty straightforward, but it's pretty effective in closing out the game. So obviously you make an infinite amount of number of tokens with Zealous Conscripts, because when you make a token of Zealous Conscripts, you untap Kiki Jiki and then you make another token of it, just repeating and making an infinite loop right there. If you don't have Zealous Conscripts, you do also have another option using Combat Celebrant. When you exert it, you get an extra combat and untap all creatures. Then you could make a token copy because of Kiki Jiki and then get infinite combats that way, and you could drain your whole opponents with Mishra right there. Another combo I do want to share with you is Dualcaster Mage and Saw in Half. This is a new combo that came out with the Infinity set with Saw in Half, so I'm not going to go into it too much, but essentially you're going to make infinite Dualcaster Mage by copying Saw in Half, making more Dualcaster Mages. Obviously they're going to get smaller and smaller each time, but as long as you're making the token creature creatures, you could get infinite dual caster mages on the battlefield. And if you do have, for example, Perforos God of the Forge on the battlefield, that's just an instant win right there. One more winning combo I do want to mention in this list is obviously Dockside Extortionist and Cloudstone Curio. If you do have another creature on the battlefield, and if Dockside can provide 8 or more treasure, which is pretty easy to do because a lot of my metas play a lot of artifacts. Obviously, it's dependent on the type of meta you're playing with, but usually it works really well with me with this combo. So essentially, you could easily bounce Dockside back to your hand with Cloudstone Curio and then make infinite mana that way. So we're making all this mana, but what can we do with it? Again, I mentioned Skitterbeam Battalion at the beginning. I did want to mention him here because I feel like it's a cool combo because it does have Trample and Haste, and when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, create 2 tokens that are copies of it. So you could easily rinse and repeat with this. With Cloudstone Curio, putting Dockside back to your hand and then playing Dockside, you gain that mana with the treasure. And because Cloudstone Curio does see Dockside go onto the battlefield, you could return another creature like Skitterbeam Battalion. Then you could just rinse and repeat again like I mentioned before, and then swing in with your Trample and Hasty Skitterbeam Battalion copy. Obviously, this also does work with Perforos God of the Forge with all these ETBs going back and forth. So there's that option right there. So that'll do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video. I know it's a little longer than my normal videos, but I did want to explain why Mishra Claimed by Gix is a huge force to be reckoned with. I tried to make it as high power as I could. Obviously, it's not going to be CDH level, but I feel like this could be pretty competitive on the table. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe. That's definitely the best way to support the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.